What is up, Watch fam? I am Christian from Theo and Harris, and on Mondays we do a rant. It's called, the video series is called Rant&h. So before we do, let's jump into a quick wristwatch check, and then let's get into the question. Okay, so today I'm wearing a vintage Omega Constellation. It's an electronic movement. I think that this watch is totally freaking amazing. I just love watches that represent decades really, really well and specifically. So I just think that the kind of lapis lazuli and gold mix on this watch is just so blatantly 70s, like late 70s/80s, that I don't know. I just have a ton of fun wearing this watch. So it's actually available on the shop at theoandharris.com. So check it out. Actually, tomorrow we're releasing six new vintage watches. So check out the shop tomorrow morning for the releases. So now let's get into the question. Okay, so people wanted to know my thoughts on the HODINKEE Zenith collaboration. Let's just go into it. Last year, HODINKEE released an MB&F collaboration. MB&F is a really cool company. I 100% respect them and admire a lot of their watches. It was a legacy machine. I thought that it was a cool watch. It was like this cappuccino color. I think it was less expensive than the regular legacy machine. So I like their watch. But, you know, I obviously, like everyone, had to acknowledge the fact that MB&F is a, kind of a niche brand, right? I mean, most people don't know what MB&F is. So most people don't even know what Jaeger culture is in the world, nonetheless MB&F, so it was, compared to Rolex, of course. So I think it was really interesting that that HODINKEE went with such a left field brand, right? And I respected it. I thought it was awesome. But this time around, they went with Zenith, which obviously is mainstream. You know, Jean-Claude Biver is at the helm there at LVMH, and it was a mainstream play, which I totally respect. No problem with that. I don't think that it was a sellout move. I think they designed a very cool watch. I think that the slate gray dial was pretty. I know people that have had their hands on it, and they said it was beautiful. 38mm case, great. They did COSC papers. They sent the watch in for kind of like a regulatory process. You know, everything was good. I mean, it was a good watch. It doesn't surprise me that HODINKEE had high standards in the production of their watch. The price of it was at $17,500, something around there. It was expensive. I mean, it's an expensive watch. You know, put it next to a Rolex and it packs more value because the El Primero movement is better than a regular old Oyster Perpetual. And I would probably prefer the Oyster Perpetual, but you know, it is a lot of mechanics for the money. It kind of brings me into my, biggest qualm with it is at $7,500. There are El Primero movements out there with great designs for a lot less money. I mean, you can pick up a Zenith El Primero, one of the more obscure references on freaking eBay, of all places, for like $3,000, $3,500. So, as far as like actual bang per buck, I don't think it's there. I don't think you have to be a HODINKEE fan. Let's put it that way. I think you have to be a real HODINKEE fan to buy the watch. Otherwise, dollar for dollar, it doesn't matter. Or you're someone who just doesn't care about money. But for that extra $4,000, to me, the watch isn't worth it. But still, I still do say that I do admire the watches. I respect their owners. I think they did a great job. I don't think that HODINKEE took their shirts totally. But I think it was cool. What I really want to talk about, though, in the Zenith kind of vein there, is last week or 2 weeks ago, Zenith unveiled their collaboration with Range Rover. Two really interesting companies. Zenith is famous for, well now at least, for doing collaborations with companies. That's why it was no surprise to me that they went with HODINKEE. HODINKEE went with Zenith. They did Cohiba, they did Rolling Stones, they've done Range Rover just now the HODINKEE. So Zenith is obviously very willing to obviously with Jean-Claude Biver at the helm, willing to do collaborations. They're willing to get more people involved in their brand, so that's a good thing. But when Zenith does 2 or 3 different, collaborations, I can't help myself but to compare the interesting kind of variables of each model and, and see which one is better. So they released the El Primero. The El Primero for Range Rover. It was an interesting watch. I think that, immediately when everyone saw it, they kind of like took a step back and they said like, oh, there goes Jean-Claude Biver again, like making irrelevant watches and having celebrities endorse them and companies endorse them. But, and I had the same reaction in the beginning too, but, and I'm going to give a huge shout out to on Instagram at Spanish Rob, because he set everyone straight, I think. I'm going to read you his Instagram post, and he was at the unveiling event. He was there when the watch was first announced. And he released, I think, a pretty well thought out and pretty honest review. So I'm going to read it to you. I know a few of you might think this is useless collab with no effort, but what Jean-Claude Biver talked about was the innovation they created that you might not hear about, like from other people. Range Rovers have a light aluminum chassis because weight is an issue, and they tasked Zenith with trying to use that material for a watch. As Jean-Claude Biver explained, aluminum, even though strong and light, wouldn't be as scratch resistant or withstand the same abuse steel or titanium could. So with the help of Hublot's alchemy alloy manufacturing sourcing capabilities, they created a stronger, scratch-resistant aluminum case. Very light and feels great on the wrist. Also a huge fan of the pump pushers. Easy to hate on the watch until you have a better understanding on the labor, craftsmanship, engineering that goes into our hobby. That's just my 2 cents. So I got to give a huge fucking shout out to Spanish Rob because he set everybody straight. If I released, I probably would have done more research about it and found out what they did. But still, I got to give it to Spanish because he's the first one to kind of release a Rant&h about this watch. And he's right. I think that the Range Rover Zenith, and as like in an alternate universe as that may sound, this is going to be so ridiculous, the Range Rover Zenith is better than the HODINKEE Zenith. And HODINKEE did a great job. They really did. I think that the design is cool. They kind of messed around with some, like I said, with the design. They made the Zenith smaller, right? They made a smaller crown supposedly, the 38 millimeters, and all these really cool little aesthetic things. They really threw it back with a vintage dial, and they did a good job. Please don't think that I'm trying to shit on HODINKEE. But when it comes to just sheer manufacturing and taking it up a notch with the level of production and creativity and actual innovation, bringing Hublot, and Hublot is really only respected in a lot of circles for their alloy and departments and how they manufacture just case materials. Bringing in those resources, right, this mixing, Jean-Claude Biver basically orchestrated this whole thing and mixed this world of innovation with Range Rover and everything. I think that it was so well thought out. I mean, they created a new version of aluminum, to cater both to Range Rover, and to achieve not just putting their name on a dial, but to actually come in line with Range Rover and make sense with their company, as well as bringing a product to the consumer that was as durable, versatile, and beater worthy as steel. That to me is amazing. See, and would I wear a Range Rover Zenith? I don't know. I don't think so. But I think that they still. It's just impressive. It's just impressive that they went so far to create such an interesting watch for the consumers, right? And it's easy to shit on. And the HODINKEE one is a little harder to shit on the surface. But in the end of the day, they both did a very good job. The perfect watch, in my opinion, the perfect Zenith collab would have been Zenith, Range Rover, and HODINKEE, as odd as that may sound. It doesn't make any sense. It would never happen in the world. But I think that Zenith and Range Rover made a better watch. But HODINKEE made a better looking watch. In my opinion, for vintage lovers, for things like that. So, although HODINKEE and Range Rover don't really align in their functionalities and in their tastes, I still think that the mixing of those worlds, right, the beauty of a vintage watch with modern kind of appeal, mixed with this amazing innovation from Hublot and Zenith, that to me would have been the perfect Zenith collaboration. I hope that Zenith in the future, moving forward, uses this El Primero movement, continues with it, right? Keeps making amazing watches around it, but with Jean-Claude Biver at the helm, mixes worlds. Let them cross, kind of contaminate each other's worlds with, from whether it's car design or manufacturing of metals and things like that. I'm really excited, from both of these two trials, watching and waiting for where Zenith is going next. I think it's going to be an amazing, amazing journey in the next 3 or 4 years. I trust Jean-Claude Biver. I think that he's an amazing guy. I don't know him personally, but from business and in watches. And I think that he's really going to bring Zenith with a historical, traditional core with the El Primero movement, but to innovate, right? And to do things with cases and dials and collaborations and companies. I just really see them going very far. So did HODINKEE do a bad job? No, they did just fine. Do I think you could buy a better, same quality Zenith elsewhere for a lot less money? Yes. But that Range Rover Zenith was pretty cool. So big shout out to everybody involved, HODINKEE, Range Rover separately, and Zenith, big, most of all, because without them, none of these things would have happened. So big props, Zenith. Good job, guys. Their design was great. 100%, I would wear that watch. Basically, I heard it's very hard to photograph, but I would wear the watch in a second. But Am I going to pay that extra huge premium from 3 to 7.5 because of design? No, I just burped. No, personally, I don't. You know, I just wouldn't do that. I really respect the El Primero movement. I don't own one, but if I was going to go get an El Primero, I would probably go with a less expensive alternative that did look good, because plenty of them do look very, very nice. Like I said, just go on eBay, go on any big watch store, and look at them. A lot of them are pretty. They're not perfect. Usually there's a little bit wrong here or there, but for the extra $4,000, I can deal with a little bit of an annoying date window or a font I'm not totally sold on. But still, definitely big respect to the dinks. Thank you guys so much for watching Rant&h. I don't know, it really means the world to me that you guys care enough to listen to my thoughts. I know I went a little bit fast this episode. I think I even went fast saying fast this episode just now. Thanks for tuning in, and do not forget to check out the new amazing vintage watches hitting theoandharris.com tomorrow morning.